Okay, so we have, I'm kind of driving in an area I don't exactly know, so this will be fun, alternating the GPS and this. So anyways, Gemini and Taurus, they both have the extroverted thinking hero and introverted feeling inferior. So I'm going to break down a little bit. I've already made a video on the hero cognitive function, so you can check that out if you'd like, but I'm going to do a brief overview. So the hero is linked to the inferior. It is considered a gateway function. The hero is our strongest and most dominant and well-developed function. Consciousness itself is order, and because of the ego, we are ordering the chaos, so to speak. Ego is always challenging the chaos. We develop this function roughly from ages 1 to 13. This function will be the most obvious in children. It will be the one they develop the most control of in their lives. The hero is linked to the inferior cognitive function. It's considered a cognitive axis. The hero feels obligated, so whatever happens to the hero happens to the inferior function. We need to develop the parent function within the ego for a sense of responsibility in the inferior function. If we want to gain a higher level of consciousness, we have to get our hero together in order to make our lives flow smoother. The hero is prone to getting stuck in extremes. It can take over the ego to the point that we are pretty much practically unconscious. So the cognitive attitude of the hero, the keywords are bravery, conviction, courage, determination, helpful, honesty, inspirational, moral, integrity, protective, self-sacrificing, fearlessness, strength, competent, and confident. So the hero extroverted thinking quotation is, I'm heroic with what others think. We tend to relate to this function the most in our lives. This is our default setting or autopilot. Just because it's our dominant function does not mean it is always doing good things for us. We can tend to have a lot of blind spots here. So TE approaches and structures things in rational ways for the sake of understanding science, utility, technology, or maintaining external order through instating laws and rules. It makes the Gemini and Taurus sensitive to public, and they love the limelight and status. They're trying to maintain outer control through efficiency or keeping things up to date. It can come out as like cleaning way too much, OCD. It's really dealing with non-human systems, not thinking about, they're pragmatic and not affiliative. So that's definitely a thing. They find their self-worth through what others think of them. So extroverted thinking, the extroversion within the thinking realm, they are trying to gather as much information really from as many sources as they can, and that is in an extroverted way, so they're most likely talking to people. It can be all about beliefs. They care about what other people believe. It's not necessarily about what is true and false. A left brain dominant cognitive function or processing through the brain. They need credentials. Scientific method comes into mind when we talk about extroverted thinking. So they're like natural scientists, so to speak. So they make more rapid and decisive decisions in their thinking realm compared to introverted thinkers. Introverted thinkers like myself, we take time to respond. We tend to be strategic and not tactical. TE is more decisive and tactical. They are all about optimal results. They are solutions oriented, and they want to impact the outside world. TE heroes, they're all about their beliefs or rationale. They are all about taking charge, directing others, organizing things. And they have like, they categorize and organize their thoughts, and they're constantly trying to reduce external chaos. They don't necessarily thrive well in chaos. like other personality types, so they need to have a system and a routine. They like to have a plan and know the process. They are consistently aware of what other people are thinking. They are kind of like considered thought vampires. They make true-false judgments, and they love having a big social network, and they like to have a consensus of what others are thinking. So like in my case, I am considered a thinker, but I'm also a water sign. I am very heavy on my TI and NI, but I tend to still kind of get the general consensus of how people feel and where people are at. So they love, TE users love to pick the brains of TI logic. They just want the facts and stark truth. They're at risk of having their own belief systems corrupted. They're great at managing finances and investing decisions, anything to do with money, numbers, and paperwork. So they are actually pretty business savvy. They can understand technology. They can understand mechanical systems. They're pretty good at managing people and actually obligating people, so it's like they aren't exactly as hands-on with other people. They will take care of business, but they prefer to be more independent when they work. So what is the inferior cognitive function? The cognitive attitude of the inferior function is lost, missing, repressed, indulgent, avoidant. It's like a crutch. That's where our addictions are, our fears, insecurities, our sensitivities. It's a touchy and defensive type of energy. We tend to try to protect it. And this is where our desires can be when we get bored with our ego. It can be very mysterious, blissful, childish, naive, extreme, delusional, and cause neurosis. So the inferior function, we roughly developed that at age 35. The inferior function is our most painful pressure point within our ego's cognition. It's like our nuclear power button. Where everything is on fire, burn it to the ground, where we find our internal and external issues magnified. Our inferior function is the gateway into our demon function or unconscious superego when triggered. But if we can develop the inferior function and not get triggered, we will begin to develop our subconscious, and that is considered our moon sign astrologically. So psychologically, the four sides of the mind, that's the ego, subconscious, unconscious, and superego. And then astrologically, you've got your sun sign, which is your the month you were born and day. And then you have your subconscious, which is your moon sign, and that is based on your location of your birth. And then I sprinkle in Mars and Saturn within our unconscious. And then our superego is considered our rising sign astrologically. And that is actually based on the time that we were born, which is extremely important. I will eventually get into all of that. So this is where our fears and insecurities exist within the inferior cognitive function. We tend to cover up our insecurities with pride. And this is where we are the most vain, where we will find hatred for other people if they're hammering at our inferior, and where we go immediately to blows. The inferior function is very difficult to control. All one can do is bring awareness to it and practice wielding it every day to make it stronger. So it's kind of like building a muscle. So because of its relative unconsciousness, the inferior function is most responsible for really many of our childish, naive, extreme, or delusional thoughts and behaviors. Despite its ability to distort, exaggerate, or idealize reality, the inferior function is still hard to resist. Because it can be so blissful through strong feelings and infatuation, for example, it can easily become a source of addiction. Like all addictions, it may inspire obsessive, compulsive, or otherwise unhealthy behaviors. When we are in the inferior grip, we may get locked into certain moods, attitudes, or behaviors that are not easily escaped. We may also become increasingly narrow-minded, irrational, self-indulgent, and irritable. So like any addiction, what begins with a sense of intense pleasure can eventually take a turn for the worst. According to analytical psychology, repression of mental activities to the unconscious mind tends to produce maladaptive tendencies. The longer and more intense the period of repression, the more likely it is that the boundary between the unconscious and conscious breaks down. When unconscious pressure remains high due to prolonged and intense repression, it will find some form of release eventually, whether through a healthy or an unhealthy means. So it's kind of like, you know how they say you need to feed your demons, you know, keep them caged, but feed them every now and then so they don't burst out and totally take over and like destroy the world and everything that you love and even yourself. So it's kind of like that. One of the four functions, Inferior, is the closest in proximity to the unconscious mind. So it's the easiest function to hijack for releasing unconscious pressures when a person is mentally exhausted. This causes a person to act really out of character for the period of time that their mental energy remains exhausted due to the oppositional nature of the Inferior. As a child approaches prepubescence, 10 to 12, they tend to overuse the dominant hero function, which in turn exacerbates the Inferior. So you are repressing your Inferior and you are totally dominant in your hero cognitive function, which is extroverted thinking. So the tension between the dominant and the Inferior reaches a critical point at that time. Unless there is some way to relieve the tension, the mind becomes increasingly fragile, unstable, and susceptible to Inferior distortion. Parents often notice their child behaving more erratically during this period. So I do have a 13-year-old, and she's a Cancer, so she is FE dominant and TI Inferior. And I'm definitely noticing this within her. So if type development stalls because the tension between the dominant and hero and Inferior functions is never properly addressed, a person is likely to show more and more serious signs of personality disorders over time. In order to gain proper access to your subconscious or a moon sign, you have to develop your Inferior function and turn it into an aspirational one. If you do not do this, you will endure a midlife crisis and your mind will force development whether you like it or not. Aspiration is faith and confidence. To make your Inferior function more aspirational, you have to let go of your insecurities and fears by gaining more experiences outside of your comfort zone with personal development in mind. You will be at your happiest when your subconscious side of your mind is developed. So strategies for dealing with the Inferior, because it can be experienced as heavenly or hellish, blissful or addictive. All types, especially individuals in phase 2 of development, have a love-hate, can't live or without it relationship with their Inferior function. In attempting to navigate the complex challenges associated with the Inferior, individuals typically employ one or more of the following strategies: avoiding, indulging, crutching, and understanding integration. In working to avoid the darker elements of our Inferior function, many people will try to cold turkey approach, ignoring or avoiding the desires of the Inferior at all costs. Or they may binge on the Inferior for a while and then swing into the opposite extreme of avoiding it. This is the same bipolar love-hate pattern we see in addictive behaviors. Another common strategy for dealing with the Inferior involves the use of crutches that serve to appease or placate it. Examples of crutching include things like persisting in unhealthy relationships, codependency, clinging to a comforting set of beliefs, or continuing in an unsatisfying job for the sake of financial security. Such crutches may serve to quell, at least temporarily, Inferior-related concerns. The degree to which crutching is viewed as good or bad will largely depend on the individual. More idealistic types may tend to see it as a cop-out, as settling for mediocrity or, rather than excellence. Others may be more content with crunching, perhaps seeing it as a necessary part of human life. Grip experiences, which are characterized by obsessive, compulsive, addictive, and perfectionistic behaviors. We also use the term grip experience because it can be incredibly difficult to escape the hold of the inferior function. This is partly due to the fact that it feels good, at least for a while. Grip experiences often masquerade as flow experiences in which we feel focused and engaged. The difference is that in healthy flow experiences, we remain open to interruptions, diversions, and deviations. Since our best self is still at the helm, we can walk away from what we are doing and enjoy something else for a while. We are not locked into a single activity or mode of functioning. We remain psychologically subtle and inflexible. Grip experiences, by contrast, are like a trap. Like an addictive drug, they give us a high that keeps us coming back for more until suddenly, seemingly out of nowhere, we find ourselves acting obsessively, compulsively, and or perfectionistically. In the grip, we develop tunnel vision, lose our sense of humor, and have trouble attending to other responsibilities. We also unwittingly provoke the inferior functions of those around us, tempting to follow our plight. Yes, it appears that grip experiences are contagious. Fortunately, so are healthy behaviors. Another characteristic of grip experiences is becoming locked exclusively into our dominant and inferior functions while skipping over the auxiliary or parent function and the tertiary or the child functions altogether. So introverted feeling, what is it? FI, or introverted feeling, takes time to form emotional attachments, but when they do, they are very deep. They're all about FI users are all about figuring out who they are and what they want. They try to make good, bad decisions, not true, false decisions. So it's based on their internal feeling or their own internal values. So am I good or bad? Not is this true or false? Because extroverted thinking is all about beliefs and rationale. So FI understands their own morality and perhaps their own values better than FE users, but that would be really a higher introverted feeler would understand their own values, and Gemini and Taurus has to kind of really work on that throughout their life because it is an inferior function. The FI users make decisions based on their own internal world rather than what's going on with the group. FI needs space and time to process or go deep into their own internal world. With TE, they do tend to make decisions faster than high TI users. So Geminis are kind of like Cancers in the fact that they can be extremely extroverted, but then they will have to take time to reflect and be by themselves to really sort out their thoughts and feelings. FETI, they base their decisions on the group's emotions and values. They take time with their internal thinking, and they're slower to make thinking decisions. But FITI, which is Gemini and Taurus, they take a lot more time with processing their internal world, but they make quicker, rational decisions. So empathy can go across the board between FE and FI users. We are now in the feeling realm, not the thinking realm, so we're talking about empathy and sympathy. High FI users can put themselves in others' shoes. FE will connect with the emotional experiences others have in that specific moment in time. It could perhaps not be as deep as FI users, healthy FI users, but FE will adapt to help. FI users tend to deeply experience the emotional realm, but so do high FE users. FE looks better at social interactions, when in reality, FI, it's all about the FI. It's an introverted cognitive function, so introversion is the source function, extroversion is what goes to the source function. So FI users are really like dominant in choosing their role in a conversation or a social situation. So they really do control the social dynamics of our society, really. They tend to not have as many issues with boundaries like extroverted feelers due to being solid in their own container, so to speak. FE users tend to not know how they themselves personally feel. If you ask me how I feel, I'm like, I don't know. Then I kind of like deflect and flip it back on them and talk about someone else, because I really don't know, and I really am not caring about that. I'm more caring about how other people are feeling. And so either way, we can be swayed within our thinking or feeling realms. If one is a thinker, they're weak in understanding their own emotions to many degrees. If one is a feeler, they tend to be weaker in their thinking. One of our greatest goals in life is to understand these realms within ourselves and try to balance them as much as possible. So understanding these things helps with ourselves as well as our social dynamics. Introverted feeling evaluates and refines personal tastes, values, and feelings. It champions individuality, emphasizing and defending the unique qualities of the individual. So it is so important. FI is all about the individual. FE is about the group. So FI shows concern for life's underdogs, children, animals, and elderly. I feel this is good or bad, and that's your truth. FI wants to feel the status. It really feels it, and it feels good, and it's not based in truth but belief. So they tend to distance themselves from external things and focuses more on the self. Tend to trust credentials more than looking at the data, the outside flashy details, not the internal small details that aren't as exciting. So that is a very, as we are seeing now in our world today, the scientific method, people push mandates onto a huge group of people, and they look at these statistics rather than understanding, oh hey, there's individuals out there that this isn't good for, but I'm just going to push this because this is what I believe, and you should believe it too. So that's like a huge example, a good example. The top-down functioning ETJs work to improve structures, systems, TE that indirectly leads to the realization of personal emotions or values. So we do want to try to work top-down, TE, NI, SE, and then FI. So inferior introverted feeling, the quotation here is, I'm fearful with what I feel. Ecchodemon is I'm demonic with what others feel. So when our insecurities are tripped, we are in the inferior function, and we can tend to, this is where our nuclear power button is. We tend to explode, we tend to just be totally out of our character. And so with Geminis, with Geminis, they are normally fearful with what they feel. They're very worried about, am I a good or bad person? But when their inferior is triggered, they go into their demon mode, and they are full-blown, I'm demonic with what others feel. So they don't give a crap about your feelings. They will just stab you with their tongue, normally is how that works out. They will hit you where it hurts emotionally, and they just do not, they will go about their life and actions like you don't matter at all. They will even tell you do not matter. I do not care. Do not care at all. So yeah, that's the funny thing. The inferior can be very difficult for us to control it. We will become, the Geminis will become introverted and depressed. Emotions are very uncomfortable. It's hard for them to align with their values. We think we should be good at this, but we know we are not. Their range of emotions are not exactly on a full spectrum as, say, like a high FE or high FI user. So the FI inferior just kind of means that they are not in tune with the emotional world as much as other people, internally or externally. So we are saying that their range of emotions are not exactly nuanced, come out as anger issues, blow-ups, extremes back and forth, high happiness, and then super upset. Can show love by criticizing other people. They like to give backhanded compliments, so that's kind of escaping emotions. I'm going to compliment you by backhanding you. I don't know. Let me improve you. You could do this better. That's kind of how they love other people. The TEFI, they're more about a collective standardized approach to things with non-human systems and an individualized approach to people along with their own feelings and values. TIFE has a collective approach to people. How do you feel about this? Equalizing roles. with a more individualized, subjective use of reason. So it's the group in thinking, and it's the individual in feeling. And then with TIFE, which is the opposite, it is my thinking versus the group's feelings. So that is how they are prioritizing their actions. Despite our confidence and imposing presence, they are on the whole no more inwardly secure of themselves than any other type. So Geminis or ENTJs tend to be the most masculine type, so they always have to act like a hard ass. I'm fine, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm just going to get shit done. I'm going to go through this task list. Look at me, I'm doing so much shit. And they totally turn off their feeling, and it makes them look very confident. They have a lot of money, they have credentials, they have this and that. But internally, they're freaking void and depressed and unhappy and insecure and probably lonely. So they put on a hard shell. They have a hard shell, but they have a very soft internal world. Because their inner judging function is FI, which is in the inferior, they may feel like they have relatively little inner control. So they feel inwardly chaotic, but outwardly they look organized. Finding inner control elusive, they naturally turn their focus outwardly, hoping that achieving outer order and control will bring them inner calm and security, which is true. I'm not going to lie about that. They do not enjoy the same luxury of inner control as high FI users, Geminis and Taurus. To compensate, they spend much of their time vigorously working to control the outside world. ENTJs and ESTJs are prone to a sense of urgency when it comes to finishing tasks or making decisions. Like, it's unreal. I'll tell you that right now. Like, I have a Capricorn or ISTJ subconscious, so that's my moon sign. It's what makes me happy. I'm very organized. I have TE, I think I have TE parent there, so it's not as like autopilot as the Gemini hero, TE hero. It's not like autopilot, this is my go, 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 go. I'm more of like, I'm responsible for this, I need to do it. It's like a constant, I need to. Their concern for being productive can prevent them from absorbing or appreciating life in general. They may take their lives as well as themselves too seriously. I can say yes, definitely, most certainly. It pushes people away for sure. While they are naturally disciplined and thorough, this can mutate into obsessiveness or compulsiveness if they aren't careful. And this is so true, especially with their cleaning in their home. Proper FI desires personal freedom to pursue inner harmony and is comfortable with seeing oneself as not bound by external rules. It's okay to be an individual. So they tend to not check in with the group at work, for example, and that can definitely be an issue. They definitely need their personal freedom. Stuck in the grip examples, so if you're stuck in the FI inferior, it can look like losing self-confidence, insecurity, tired and burnt out, withdrawn, unproductive, or they may be over or under analyzing things too much in their head. They can fail to meet deadlines. They become too harsh or rash or absolute in their conclusions, not taking your feelings into consideration at all. They could be procrastinative, easily hurt, insensitive. They can feel like a victim, try to hold in feelings around others. They deflect emotions through sarcasm, aggression, passive aggression. They can overvalue work while undervaluing relationships. They need constant respect or adoration. Like the watch me all the time. Watch me while I work. I want you to just look at what I can do. They won't admit personal limitations or failures. They try to logically justify partiality. They can show one person attention in front of the person they are stonewalling emotionally on purpose, for example. I have had this happen to me quite a few times, to be honest. I was in a romantic relationship with an ENTJ for many years, and that drove me nuts. That drove me absolutely nuts. Like, they will turn you completely off, and like, they'll say the meanest thing I've ever heard in my life, and then they'll turn around and smile and giggle with someone else. It's absolutely, I can't do that. I can't do that. So they can, when they're stuck in the grip, they don't address individual differences or people's concerns in a sensitive manner at all. They can become controlling rather than listening and empathizing, and they can tend to misinterpret emotions as manipulative. All emotions are manipulative. We're not human beings, we're robots. Just keep going. Let's go, let's go, let's go. They can't express negative emotions in a constructive manner, so it's normally blow-ups. They can't appropriately express emotions, affection, and appreciation. Can't handle emotional displays from others. Another grip example would be overly fixated on others and reveling in victimhood, extremely narrow with where they place their passion and feeling. Devotes themselves to artistic preferences as a way to systematically control their personal passion and feeling rather than expressing it. They'll start to live a double life where the divide between public and private is separated to an extreme that they can justify all kinds of problematic behaviors as long as they are done in private. TE blames the outside world. Extroversion needs a scapegoat for its stress and suffering. Can tend to be like, oh, humans are weak. So they tend to blame the outside world and blame other people rather than taking responsibility for their own actions. They can be aggressive, have an aggressive mindset of trying to systematically weed out weaknesses or inefficiencies while ignoring their real life problems. They can resist being in touch with their subjective experiences in life. Things that trigger TE and can get Gemini stuck in a grip, inferior grip, disorganization, poorly defined roles or where rules and standards shift, lack of tangible achievements or progress despite one's efforts, strong emotional displays irrelevant to issues at hand, personal criticism, feeling excluded from decision making, not having control over an outcome that is extremely important. So coming out of the grip, they need to have time alone, they need to vent to others, they need to attend to personal needs, express feelings through safe avenues. ENTJs need to utilize NI parent to strengthen FI inferior. Geminis need to prioritize reflection on personal potential. They need to gain vision in order to engage in meaningful activities that are productive for long-term development. So don't get stuck in the little details. Ultimately, ENTJs or Geminis need to understand introverted feeling as a decision-making, judging function, need to use it to understand their own limits and boundaries, and that it is not an emotional-based process to be avoided. Do not avoid your emotions, Gemini. Negatively leaning into the grip examples: realize you're giving with strings attached, then you won't be afraid that you're a bad person when you don't. They tend to binge on all the sex with females under them. They will sleep with the wives of men that screw them over. They will binge on all sex with females under them. Women underneath them allow them to sleep to the top. They don't want to do the good things and become totally selfish and greedy. They feel like they have to prove they've been a good person rather than being judged all the time. So their virtue and vice is altruism versus aberrance. So they can be very greedy, or they can tend to be very charitable, and normally that's to a certain person. It's not exactly a group thing, it's more like a person that they're mentoring. People always try to put them in their place rather than trying to have a relationship with them. It can lead them to having abandonment issues in a serious way. They seem to be singled out as the bad guy. Geminis do a lot. It has to do with their need for loyalty while having their own freedom, and how they approach money and finances. They have the most income compared to all the other signs by a huge margin. If an ENTJ actually values someone, they will provide time, money, resources, and effort. They want to have good rate on return. When they invest in someone, they will most likely take more than they put in. It's really hard for them to give without strings attached. They normally keep a score. In the moment, they can give to just give, but over time, their shadow gets in the way and tells them that person owes me. And that's how they begin to feel. They do desire to give everyone a good experience with their inner child, which is extroverted sensing, but eventually the NE critic wakes up and they will want to collect. So I used to hang out in this town a lot. I was huge into bodybuilding, so I used to have like 5 different gym memberships, and I used to just meet up with people and work out and talk about fitness and their goals and what's the updated information, going on in the fitness and nutrition realm. So that was pretty fun for quite a while. But now here I am into psychology. So the inferior, oh shit, what my freaking ideas now this entire time.